Um, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like clinical precision. You break your arm, they take an x-ray, and it shows that jagged white line on the monitor, right? And the doctor just points and says, there it is. There's the problem.
Yeah, it's very binary, black and white. I
Yeah,
mean, we find a lot of comfort in things that can be, visibly categorized and isolated like that.
exactly. But look at how we diagnose our daily stress, our anxiety, or just this modern burnout we all feel. Suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Right.
And it's mostly because we tend to point the machine entirely outward. We look at like a gridlock traffic jam or a looming economic recession or even just a passive-aggressive email from a boss and we say, there it is, there's the broken bone.
We assume the external thing is the root cause.
Yeah, we operate under this fundamental assumption that the world around us is the disease. But today, we are cracking open a compilation of 50 core teachings from a prominent Buddhist philosopher named Buddhadasa. And the very first thing these sources do is grab that x-ray machine and forcibly turn it back around on the operator.
Which is a pretty jarring shift in perspective, to say the least.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this, because the core premise here is that our stress isn't actually caused by the world. It's caused by a massive fundamental misunderstanding of who we actually are.
Yeah, so the test introduces this foundational concept of atta, which translates roughly to the feeling of I and mine.
Right.
And this is identified as the absolute root of all human suffering. It is the ego, but, not just ego in the sense of arrogance or vanity.
Like bragging about a promotion or something.
Right, not just that. It's the very illusion of a separate, permanent self. And to really grasp this, Buddhadasa makes a crucial distinction between what he calls everyday language and Dhamma language, or like the language of ultimate truth.
That distinction really shifted my perspective when I was reading through this. I mean, in everyday language, we think of birth as this singular biological event, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A baby comes out of a womb, someone signs a birth certificate, and that's it. You are born. But in Dhamma language, birth has absolutely nothing to do with biology.
No, not at all.
That's the momentary arising of the ego. It's that sudden, intense flare-up of me or mine in the mind.
And the consequence of that flaring up is immediate. I mean, this completely redefined the concepts of heaven and hell for us.
Oh, yeah. The heaven and hell stuff is fascinating.
In everyday language, people view these as, physical destinations awaiting us in some mysterious afterlife. But Buddhadasa firmly rejects that. He actually refers to waiting for an afterlife, heaven, as heaven to fool children.
Wow. That's a pretty strong way to put it.
It is, because in Dhamma language, hell is simply an actively suffering, agitated mind, and heaven is a peaceful, unbothered mind.
So it's internal.
Entirely. And both of these states happen instantly, right here, and the exact moment the mind reacts to a stimulus.
So wait, if birth is just the ego popping up, is our daily anxiety essentially us being reborn into mini hells every time someone cuts us off in traffic? Or a boss sends a passive-aggressive email?
What's fascinating here is that you've hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
An email arrives with the subject line, urgent chat needed. The ego flares up.
Right. You instantly think, are they mad at me? What did I do?
Exactly. And boom, we've just birthed ourselves straight into a Tuesday afternoon hell.
Oh, man, I've been to that Tuesday afternoon hell many times.
We all have. So nirvana, then, isn't some mystical realm you teleport to after death. It's available right here at your desk. It is simply the cooling of the mind's fires, the extinguishing of that greed, anger, and ego.
Right.
But to get to that cooling, the text offers two vital active antidotes, which are tathata and sunnata.
Tathata and sunnata. Okay, I'm looking at how these are described, and there feels like a real risk of confusing them with just not caring about anything. Like, am I misreading that?
No, it's a very common misreading, actually. Tathata translates to it is what it is, or thusness.
Thusness, okay.
Yeah, it is the ability to see that absolutely everything is just natural cause and effect. So the person in traffic cut you off because they are late, they're highly stressed, and maybe they just have poor spatial awareness.
Right, they're just panicking.
Exactly. It's a chain of physical and psychological causes. It has absolutely nothing to do with you.
Which is hard to remember in the moment.
Oh, incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But when you see reality through the lens of tathata, you don't fight it with desire or anger. You don't take it personally because there's no permanent person for it to happen to.
You're just like observing the physics of the situation. Just, a 2-ton vehicle has abruptly entered this lane.
Which brings us to the second concept, sunnata, or emptiness.
Emptiness. Yeah, a lot of people hear emptiness and immediately think of nihilism, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They picture walking around like a zombie,
Yeah.
totally disengaged from life, just uncaring.
Right.
But Buddhadasa clarifies that emptiness is actually a highly functional elite state of mind. It is a mind operating with peak intelligence and situational awareness, just without the heavy, sticky attachment of the ego.
I mean, it's like a computer processor, right?
That's a good way to look at it.
It runs incredibly fast when it isn't bogged down by a million background applications constantly screaming, "What about me? Look at me!"
The ego is basically malware draining your mental battery.
That is the perfect modern equivalent. Yes, the ego is malware.
But, okay, even if my mind is running smoothly
Yeah.
and I've supposedly, uninstalled this ego malware, I still have to interface with a society that is highly infected by it.
Right, the real world. Yeah, we have to shift from this abstract philosophy to Tuesday morning reality. I mean, we have bills to pay, projects to deliver, performance reviews to survive. A toxic corporate culture isn't just going to magically disappear because I'm practicing Sunada.
No, it won't.
So how does this apply to the 9-to-5 grind? The sources framework in a very unconventional way, calling it almost a spiritual practice in itself.
Yeah, the text states simply, Dhamma is duty.
Duty.
Doing your duty according to the laws of nature, doing exactly what needs to be done in the present moment, is the highest practice of Dhamma. You don't need to retreat to a monastery or sit cross-legged in a cave to be spiritual.
Which is fantastic because my Wi-Fi is terrible in caves.
Right. But Buddhadasa specifically says we should be working with an empty mind. He argues that true meditation is the steadfast focus of the mind working efficiently on a task without muddying the waters with expectations of wealth, status, or praise.
Just doing the work.
Exactly. The quote from the text is, live low, aim high. Be a minimalist in your material life, but have high spiritual goals.
It's a profound decoupling, really. You are separating your intrinsic self-worth from the external outcome of your labor.
Which is incredibly freeing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also tricky. I have to push back on this a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Working with an empty mind, with absolutely no expectation of status or promotion, that sounds like a recipe for a stagnant career.
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, in the modern corporate world, if you don't advocate for yourself, if you don't have that hungry ego driving you to claim credit, you just become a doormat. How is this empty mind approach, not just giving up and letting your employer walk all over you?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at another core concept in the text, the middle way, or Majjhima Patipada.
Right, the middle way.
This philosophy is fundamentally about balance, not too tense, not too loose. Removing the ego doesn't mean removing your competence, your professional boundaries, or your negotiation skills. The argument here is that you actually become more effective, not less.
I'm struggling to see how. If I don't care about the promotion, why would I even fight for a better budget or negotiate my salary?
Because ego makes you negotiate out of fear.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. You demand a higher salary because your identity feels disrespected without it, or you want to show off to your peers, and if they say no, you are devastated.
Yeah, it becomes a personal rejection.
Exactly. Emptiness, on the other hand, makes you negotiate based on the objective market value of your labor and the logical needs of your life.
Just the numbers.
Right. The latter is actually much more ruthless and clear-headed. Think about how much energy is wasted in a typical workday on office politics, imposter syndrome, worrying about what the boss thinks of you, or agonizing over a colleague getting more credit.
Oh, hours. Sometimes whole days.
All that friction is the ego. If you remove it, you are left with pure, unadulterated focus on the task itself.
Okay, yeah, that makes practical sense. It's the difference between delivering a presentation because you desperately want everyone to validate your intelligence versus delivering a presentation because the information is just valuable and needs to be communicated clearly.
Exactly. The second option removes all the shaking performance anxiety. The work becomes an end in itself.
It becomes a flow state.
Yes. The text has this incredibly powerful line. When the mind is empty of I, work is happiness, the world is happiness.
I love that. Okay, so maybe I can optimize my own work life and survive the office by dropping the ego.
Yeah.
But scaling this up, what happens when we look at the entire societal level?
That's where it gets really ambitious.
Because the sources don't just stay in the individual's head. Buddhadasa diagnoses the modern world with a very specific, highly contagious disease. He calls it the epidemic of selfishness.
Yeah, he posits that literally every major social problem from economic inequality to environmental collapse to warfare, could be solved if humans simply reduce their selfishness. The text advocates for something it calls Dhammic socialism.
Right, and it's super important to note how Buddhadasa is using the word socialism here. We really have to be impartial about this and look purely at his definition.
Absolutely.
He strips it of all its 20th century political baggage. He's not talking about Marxist state control or left-wing versus right-wing economics or any specific political manifesto that we'd argue about today.
No, he's talking about a structural return to nature's balance.
Right.
In nature, nothing hoards more than it needs.
Hmm.
A bird doesn't hoard thousands of worms while other birds starve. Dhammic socialism is a society built on the principles of Dhamma, which means mutual care, natural balance, and duty rather than the relentless pursuit of self-interest.
But the mechanism for getting there is where he really zeroes in, and his main target is modern education.
Oh, his critique of education is brutal.
So what does this all mean? He uses this bizarre but brilliant metaphor, calling our system a dog with a short tail, education.
It is a very biting analogy.
I love the imagery, but let's break down why a short tail matters. In nature, a dog uses its tail for balance. It allows the animal to steer, to change direction quickly, and to communicate. A dog without a tail is fundamentally misaligned with its own nature.
Right.
So is the text essentially saying our modern, hyper-competitive education system is perfectly designed to produce highly capable yet deeply miserable people?
Yes, that is exactly what he's saying. Buddhadasa argues that modern education teaches us secular knowledge for survival. It teaches us coding, structural engineering, high finance.
How to split the atom.
Exactly. But it completely fails to teach people how to extinguish their own internal suffering. We have mastered the external, material world, but we are completely illiterate when it comes to managing our internal world.
So our universities are basically churning out millions of highly trained dogs running around in circles, unable to balance themselves.
That's the tragic reality he points out. And this is where Buddhadasa emphasizes that Buddhism, in its purest form, is highly scientific.
Really? How so?
Well, he references the Kalama Sutta, which is a famous teaching that essentially functions as the scientific method applied to the human mind.
Oh, really?
It explicitly states, do not believe anything based on blind faith, tradition, or authority. Not even the Buddha's own words.
Wow, not even the founder.
Right. You must test the teachings yourself through practice, observe the mechanics of your own mind, and evaluate the results with your own intelligence.
And if we test our current societal model using that scientific method, the empirical results are disastrous.
Precisely. The epidemic of selfishness just keeps spreading through these highly educated but spiritually hollow systems, because you cannot build a peaceful society out of individuals who are secretly burning with greed, anger, and ego.
It's structurally impossible. A house made of burning bricks will simply be a burning house.
That's a great way to visualize it. This is why the text says temples and religious institutions shouldn't be places for hollow rituals, chanting, or asking a deity for lottery numbers.
Right.
They should be treated strictly as spiritual hospitals to cure the disease of the mind.
They are triage centers for the ego.
Exactly. And true followers aren't just people who have a specific religion checked off on a census form. It's anyone who is actively putting in the work to end their suffering.
It's a verb.
Yes, you have to take the medicine, not just worship the prescription pad. That is the crux of his message. The label doesn't matter. The active treatment of the mind does.
Okay, so we've got these spiritual hospitals conceptualized for society, but day to day, out in the wild, what is the actual maintenance protocol?
What do you mean?
Well, it's one thing to understand this intellectually while listening to a deep dive in your car or at the gym, right?
Sure.
But it's another to live it when the dog throws up on the rug, the mortgage is due, and you're just exhausted.
Yeah.
How do we practically maintain this liberating, ego-free perspective?
The text suggests we have to fundamentally change where we look for wisdom. The sources note that if you have an observant mind, even a rock can teach you Dhamma. Yes, a rock. Nature itself is the purest teacher, because nature operates entirely on those principles of cause and effect we mentioned earlier without any ego whatsoever.
Oh, I see.
A tree grows, a tree falls. It doesn't have an existential crisis about falling. It doesn't blame the wind. It simply follows the law of nature.
It just does tree things.
Exactly. And to get ourselves to that level of peace, Buddhadasa offers this incredibly intense piece of advice. Die before you die.
Okay, that sounds really morbid at first glance.
It does, but it's actually the ultimate form of liberation. Die before you die means killing the ego, intentionally letting that clingy I die right now so that the rest of your biological life can be lived in actual happiness.
Because if you have already let go of the illusion of owning anything, you are completely free from the fear of loss. You can't lose what you don't own.
Exactly. But the text warns us about three massive traps that prevent us from achieving this pre-death ego death. They are eat, lust, and honor.
Eat, lust, and honor.
Yeah, these are the three pillars of the ego's survival. Eat doesn't just refer to food. It represents consumerism, materialism, the constant acquiring of stuff to fill a void.
The Amazon Prime trap?
Very much so. Lust represents the endless, exhausting chase for sensory pleasure and distraction. And honor represents the ego's most desperate need status, respect, and social validation.
Which perfectly explains why we handle conflict so poorly. I mean, the sources have a fascinating take on anger and forgiveness here. Buddhadasa says that anger is like biting yourself first.
That's such a vivid phrase.
Yeah, before you even harm the person you're mad at, you have already set your own mind on fire. And the forgiveness aspect, I latch onto this metaphor so hard. He says, forgiveness isn't a favor you do for someone else. It's the act of taking the garbage out of your own mind.
It completely reframes the entire concept of grace.
Totally. Viewing forgiveness as taking out your own mental trash is such a visceral image. It completely shifts the act from being some noble, self-sacrificing favor for your enemy, which, ironically, usually just strokes our own ego anyway, to a purely practical act of self-care. I mean, why hold on to burning garbage in your own living room just to prove a point to the person who threw it there?
This raises an important question about how we interact with the world. When you hold on to anger, you are essentially demanding that the past be different. You are arguing with reality.
Yeah, you're fighting what already happened.
It's a refusal to accept the tathata, the suchness of the event. Someone wronged you. That is the reality. Forgiveness is simply accepting the physics of what happened, recognizing the ignorance of the person who did it, and throwing away your toxic reaction so your own mind can be clean again.
It's just mental hygiene. Taking out the trash.
And this all culminates in what the text presents as the ultimate one-sentence summary of the entire Buddhist philosophy. Nothing whatsoever should be clung to. Buddhadasa bluntly states that nothing in this world is worth having or being.
Now wait, let's pause on that. Nothing is worth having or being. For someone listening right now, that could sound extremely bleak.
It can sound very detached, yes.
It sounds like a directive to sell your house, quit your job, abandon your family, and just go stare at a blank wall until you expire.
No. It is vital to understand the difference between using the world and clinging to it.
Okay, explain that.
Saying nothing is worth having or being doesn't mean you can't live in a house, excel at a career, or love your kids. It means recognizing that all of these things are functional conventions. They are roles you play and tools you interact with.
Right.
You enjoy them, you fulfill your duties to them. Remember, Dhamma is duty. But you do not let them become your permanent identity. You don't fuse your core soul with them.
So if my identity is, I don't know, the vice president of sales and I get laid off, I am utterly destroyed. My self has literally died.
Exactly.
But if I just happen to be performing the duties of that role and I get laid off, it's just a logistical puzzle to solve.
Exactly the right application.
Yeah.
You use the world to live, but you do not cling to the world to define you. You play the game, but you never forget it's a game. That is the ultimate cheat code for a peaceful life.
Wow. So let's bring all of this together for you listening. We started with the X-ray machine, looking in the wrong direction.
Right.
We learned that the true source of our stress isn't out there in the traffic or the economy. It's the invisible illusion of the ego constantly being born in our minds.
The Atta.
Yep. We explored how to turn the Tuesday morning grind into an actual spiritual practice by working with an empty mind, focusing purely on the duty without the friction of needing validation.
And we zoomed out to see how a society built on mutual care rather than the epidemic of selfishness could heal itself.
Right, turning our institutions from factories of unbalanced, highly capable people into actual spiritual hospitals. And finally, the daily maintenance spotting the traps of consumerism and status, actively taking out our mental trash through forgiveness, and remembering that ultimate cheat code.
That absolutely nothing whatsoever should be clung to.
It is a remarkably complete toolkit for navigating modern existence without losing your mind.
It really is.
It's a pragmatic way to stop waiting for some future heaven to make everything better and to start putting out the fires of stress right now, whether you're sitting at your desk, stuck on the freeway, or just washing the dishes at home.
The work is always here and now.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly mind-bending thought inspired by all this.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Well, we've talked a lot today about how our minds are constantly creating our reality, how this feeling of I is just a fleeting illusion, a piece of malware that gets born and dies thousands of times a day based on our reactions to emails or traffic or compliments.
The constant, endless arising and passing away of the ego.
Yeah, so if that's true, if the I is really just a temporary reaction, then who exactly is the I that just spent the last 20 minutes listening to this deep dive?
Mm.
If you pause right now, close your eyes for a second, and try to actually locate the listener inside your head, what do you actually find?